What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Wednesday, January 26th, and that means two things. One, you're already tired of hearing people argue about the Baseball Hall of Fame and NFL overtime rules. And two, it's a Brady Quinn football show.
It is kind of a travesty, though, not to touch on the baseball subject, but I mean, come on.
We can touch on it very quickly if you want. We just don't.
I just either you're all in or all out. I hate the whole idea that like some guys during the steroid era get in and some don't.
Barry Bonds never tested positive.
Right. And
it's like,
by the way, like I've actually said this about, performance enhancing drugs. If there's one sport where I'm like, I still really don't know how it helped him that much. I mean, you can say, oh, he has more power and strength or whatever. Okay. You still have to put the bat on the ball. Like that's does it increase your hand-eye coordination, your eyesight? Are you like Superman with your eyesight? I don't, that's the one thing that bothered me. If you want to make a case for a pitcher, okay, I get it. It directly relates to every pitch, power, endurance. I get all that. And you can make the case, well, you're going to be able to swing harder, et cetera. But there's still the skill of putting the bat on the ball. And that's something that like steroids ain't going to help you that much, right? Like there's certain things that bother me about that. But
also I would say this, that while this applies to most sports, just because sports for a long time have given people in this country and all over the world a lot of fame and a lot of money, that there is an inherent incentive to cheat your face off. Baseball is a sport of cheaters. It is the sport of cheaters, scuffing balls, eating greenies in the 30s. Like these guys are like up all night traveling and doing all this stuff. They're popping. It's like, oh, they're just greenies. No, that's illegal. It's like speed. It's just,
how many guys are taking greenies that are in the Hall of Fame right now? By the way, baseball itself cheats. You juice up the baseballs. Let's be real about this for a second. All right. You wind those puppies as tight as possible so they pop off the bat, right? You make it so the laces or the seams are even more grounded down, or years where you're like, maybe we don't want as many home runs.
Right.
Go ahead and raise those puppies up. Like I've looked into this. The margin of error between baseballs one year and the next, as far as just how hard they are or soft or the seams or not, like all of that is in a huge margin of error, like a wide ranging margin of error. And we're going to sit here and then all of a sudden get mad at players who are trying to find an edge or an advantage. Like it's so dumb.
And like Bud Selig throughout the entire McGuire, Sosa, Bonds home run explosion, baseball had fallen completely by the wayside in 1994 after the 1994 strike. Kids like your age and my age, they had been like, well, screw you. If you want to take baseball, we love baseball. You want to take it away from us? We're out. And then to get back in, they just blatantly ignored this crop of home run hitters who started jamming needles in their ass and smearing cream all over their bodies to try and blast the ball out of the park while also eating greenies. And they're like, oh, I cannot believe this is going on in the game. And the writers are like, oh, steroids? It's like, you all knew, a-holes. Like, what do you can't pick or choose. I think the best argument too, and this applies to the NFL Hall of Fame as well, or any Hall of Fame. It's a museum to tell you about baseball.
Yeah, it's about history. Yeah.
So if that's what it needs to be. It's not here are the greatest players who honor the game the best. Like O.J. Simpson's in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the way, I think he's actually down in South Florida now, which is a little bit scary.
You guys should hang.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pass on that, because I might be the one hanging off of, a balcony or something.
I don't know if that's really his move. I mean, maybe.
Again, I mean, if you got away with it once, I mean,
I didn't mean the murder.
Fool me once.
I mean the style of murder.
Oh, my bad. Fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me.
He's gonna let you leave you hanging off the side of like Las Olas Bridge. He's just gonna. Somebody else is gonna stab you in cold blood, and then OJ will have to spend the rest of his life looking for the real murderer.
Right.
Maybe that's the real murderers in South Florida.
Well, yeah, there's a homestead. There's all sorts of things there for protection. So I'm sure that's why he's down here. But I'm glad we were able to make that segue over to O.J. Simpson. But it is a valid point at this time talking about the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. I also think it's odd that like after a period of time that like they have no longer the opportunity to be inducted in. It's like why? Like,
Yeah.
why do they only get so many bites at the apple? It doesn't make any sense to me why that would be the case. And I also hate the fact that, you've got a bunch of people who, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way.
Or like you're complaining about the media. Yeah, it's fine. Just
Well, I guess what I'm pointing out is if for by and large, a lot of the voters haven't played, right? And when that's the case, I think one of the hard things is they don't have that perspective of an athlete at that time. And so, I remember having a trainer growing up who, said, "Hey man, everyone had him." I felt like I was at a huge disadvantage because I was one of the only ones. He's like, "No, I might push the boundaries of some of the stuff that came out," but he's like, "I never took that kind of stuff." And he used to tell stories of how, it was everywhere. Like he's like, you're doing interviews, and if you just looked at the camera behind that player at their locker, like there sits like everything you'd want to know. Yeah. Half the horses at the at Churchill Downs or up there, the Kentucky Derby are all taking that stuff, right? Like he's like, just go. Bob Baffert's probably got a pantry full of this stuff from back from the '90s in Major League Baseball. So you hear a lot of those stories, and you wonder if there shouldn't be more voters that had played the game so they have greater perspective as to what that era was like, as opposed to purely being judgmental. Like I think as a human race, we tend to be much more understanding and empathize when we've actually experienced something that someone else has dealt with.
Well, it's very difficult to empathize with anything unless you've actually dealt with it. I mean, like literally. I would also say that it is you played like what years did you play again? What 2006 to like
2007 to my last was in training camp with Dolphins in 14.
Yeah, so I mean, like that's kind of football's like quasi. I mean, like that's that there was a big spike in the belief that people were using steroids in professional football.
I mean, think about this, and I always thought about this. Not that it would ever have helped me in any way. Maybe coming back from an injury or something in training, but it's only a 4-game suspension. Like if you're downside risk, if you're a player that if you take whatever it is and it can help you be a Pro Bowler, an all-pro player, or get a huge contract, but your downside risk is only making 75% of what you're going to make. I mean, I would actually say the more you make, the bigger star you were in the NFL at that point, the more you were incentivized to take that risk. Because if I'm getting, let's say, $16 million a year and my downside's 12, but my upside's 16, and the potential of making more of my bonuses or the future, whatever. Yeah, I could see why a lot of guys would take that risk. So I always thought that, at least in football, where I do think there's a direct correlation to performance enhancers and the way it can impact your play. I mean, guys I knew that took stuff. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen guys who had good careers and became a Pro Bowler, and you're just going, wow, like this is crazy how this worked out for them. But that's something that, again, is their choice. I honestly didn't really even view it as like cheating at the time. When I was looking, I was kind of like, that's what they want to do. If they're trying to find edge, so be it. It's not necessarily going to be something that helps them, get to that status. They still have to go out there and execute. So there's that whole portion of it too, even with a football player, even though I do think there's more of a physical element to it where it can help you.
Yeah. And it was also just like for like 10 or 15 years, is our athletes were all just like gigantic headed, like angry monsters who didn't like dealing with people on the field. It's like what I mean, wow, everybody went from so lovely and like kind of chill and slender and just all of a sudden meat sticks. Anyway,
it was all Lattimore from the program. Like that was basically what it was. People bashing their head into like people's passenger side windows and
all right, let's by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, youtube.com/pick6, you can see me and Brady in our various hoodies and headwear talking about Baseball Hall of Fame, which who doesn't love that? Like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, listening anywhere, we appreciate it, of course. But if you're listening on Spotify, they have added a rating system. Leave us a 5-star rating. Now it's time for an award-winning segment created in the Quinn household, in the great mind of Brady Quinn, called Read Between the Lines.
All right. Well, I wish we could start off with some fresh news, something that kind of just, really came out here in the past 24 hours, but unfortunately.
It did come out in the past 24 hours.
I know, but at this point, it's going to be kind of old news.
Well, I think that the fact that you and I, this is released, we're recording this on Tuesday night. It's released on Wednesday morning. The fact that this is happening with your input as a professional NFL analyst and college football analyst and former professional football player is added value to this podcast.
Well, thank you.
Don't sell it short.
Yeah, thank you. And let's not distract away from this segment. It's called Read Between the Lines here with Will Brinson. And so here's the headline. Sean Payton informs the Saints that he's stepping down. His plans are not to be coaching in 2022. Read between the lines, Will. Help me out with this one.
I'm just going to go straight to Sean Payton's brain because I think that's where this stems from. And it's, oh my God, I don't have a quarterback. We have.
But what do you mean? He signed Taysom Hill to that deal that he could become a $100 million quarterback and he could be the quarterback of the future there, right? Isn't that what all the BYU fans, the Brady Papingas want to say out there about it?
I think it's, oh my God, I've been doing this for 15 years. Actually, I tell you this. I thought Sean Payton's press conference on Tuesday was really, he was very open about it. And he brought up the COVID situation multiple times. And I really do think that there are several coaches in the past 2 years who have, and this is not in multiple sports for various reasons. Like, for instance, Coach K and Roy Williams left college basketball. I think the COVID stuff wears on you because it's just, you're old and you're dealing with all these, like you don't know who's playing and you're, different protocols.
Regulations, protocols. Your job's changed to become harder.
Correct. And you also have the one and done stuff in college basketball. And I think it just became, they're like, you know what? It's too much. Like, walk away while we can still walk away. I think Sean Payton, the last 2 years have been very trying on him. Won the Drew Brees' final year. He'd spent his entire career as a head coach with Drew Brees. And then this year, dealing with additional COVID protocols, the Saints had a game where they were missing everybody. Ian Book starts against Miami. If they beat Miami, they probably end up in the play. They do end up in the playoffs.
Right.
And I just think it all became too much. He said that he thought coming into 2021 that maybe he wanted to walk away. And then you start to look around, you're like, all right. And look, I'll be honest, like Sean Payton doesn't, he mentioned that he looks more out of shape. He he was wearing a shirt that made him look a little Parcellian in the upper
That's
torso.
all coaches though, man. That's
I mean, he said, he's like, look, man, people say that I look bad. I don't look bad, or I look tired. I'm just out of shape. I just think it was 15 years in New Orleans, a grind of that.
Less food, huh? It's all that New Orleans Asian food.
Can you imagine staying skinny in New Orleans? No chance.
Yeah, it's impossible.
And I think he saw this as an opportunity, a really good spot with the Saints also having $72 million over the cap currently. No quarterback.
Yeah, let's call it what it is, okay? You have uncertainty at the quarterback position, or some would say no quarterback. You got a terrible salary cap situation, an aging roster, and then on top of that, you might be in a division that still has to deal with Tom Brady for another year. And if that's the case, I mean, those are all four pretty good reasons to be like, yeah, I don't know about this. Maybe I'll take a year off, see how I feel about everything. I brought a Super Bowl to this city when they were probably at their lowest point after Hurricane Katrina. So I don't know that he necessarily owes them anything. I also think if you look back through the years, forget COVID, but even before that, Breeze was like banged up. It's like every single time there was an injury he had to deal with, and then Teddy Bridgewater coming in, or then it was Taysom Hill, and then it was Simeon, then it was Ian Book. Like, you go through a lot of that, especially as a play caller. It's tough. I mean, you're starting over again. And I think one of the things that coaches and play callers take for granted is when they've got someone that they trust and they have confidence in, they can rely on, and they've got a routine with, where it makes things a little simpler. They don't have to start over again or do anything extra out of the norm. That's where I feel like it can become very wearing, aside from the COVID protocols, which, look, I mean, the coaches I know in the league, they couldn't stand it. They hated it. I know it's an unpopular opinion from people on the outside, but it's hard to communicate. Their entire job is predicated on communicating, and you're making them wear a mask half the time. It's like these guys are like, look, man, I've been through plenty of, flus and pandemics, different things. Some coaches, depending on where their life had taken them, they didn't even served. And so it's like, you get to a point where you go, come on, man. Like, I've been through a lot. So I can understand the frustration by it. I think he's looking at it saying they're probably going to be greener pastures a year from now, right? Yeah. Dallas Cowboys, which I know is near and dear to his heart, and I'm sure Jerry Jones then would be looking forward to him.
McCarthy's seat just got a lot warmer on Tuesday.
Oh, exponentially high, exponentially warmer. I mean, you and I were talking last week about maybe Dan Quinn not getting out the door and then moving on from him for that reason. But Sean Payton's like, that I don't know. I guess I was going to call him second to Jason Garrett, but Since they let go of Jason Garrett, it's probably Sean Payton who's number one in line if that job comes open.
Well, I think Jerry looks at Sean Payton as like the one who got away potentially because he was there, and also maybe he's an excuse to say, you know what, we can go with Mike McCarthy this year. Yeah. And if he doesn't do something awesome, and Sean Payton wants to get back in, we got to compensate the Saints, but we can figure that out. Let's not forget too, last year they lost to the Buccaneers in the second round of the playoffs. Yeah, because they beat the Bears. The prior 3 years of that, they lost in overtime to Kirk Cousins when he hit Kyle Rudolph.
Yep.
The previous year to that was the championship game with the Chauncey Gardner.
Yeah.
The refs debacle. That feels like 40 years ago, by the way. And then the previous year to that was the Minneapolis Miracle.
Yeah.
So, sort of like Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, where you would almost understand if it's like, you know what, enough is enough. I can't take it anymore. The last 5 years have been, rewarding. We've had great teams and we've just come up excruciatingly short. And I've been sitting here on a Zoom call every week. I thought it was really, he just sounded like somebody who was burnt out and needed a break and had the ability to take that break. And we were texting about this earlier on Tuesday. And I mentioned Mike McCarthy with Green Bay and Mike Tomlin with Pittsburgh. And the reason I brought it up wasn't that I thought that those two compared with Sean Payton, because I would take Sean Payton 10 times out of 10 with all those guys.
Ooh, I don't know. I think Mike Tomlin would be up there for me.
I'm just a Sean Payton guy, but Tomlin's right there too.
I'm kind of a Tomlin guy. I would love to have played for Tomlin.
Sure. No, Tomlin's awesome. My point is just that Ryan Wilson had said on our emergency Sean Payton pod that it's like, it's weird. Sometimes the Steelers fans are always like, do we need somebody else? But no one knows ever like Sean Payton's got to go. Except for those maybe 3, 7, and 9 seasons.
I think it's like the Southern accent or something. It's a little different down south. They're like, get him out of here. Get someone else in here.
Well, he also just brought a loser franchise a title in the wake of one of the most devastating natural disasters in the history of.
Well, and he's provided consistency and stability. Granted, there was like a 3-year, run of 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. But the reality is, it's not an easy division. I mean, the NFC South rotates with a different division winner almost every single year. At least it was that way probably for the better part of a decade plus. So, or maybe since it's like formation. I remember looking back at it.
Yeah, the Saints had won 4 straight prior to the Bucs winning this year. But before that, it was all constant.
Every year. Yeah.
Ron Rivera would win one. The Bucs would pop up randomly. The Falcons were very good.
John Foxy. Foxy was back in there at one point.
John Coors Light Fox.
Okay, so it begs the question, though, what's he doing next? Because, there's our helmets to give us. Wow, look at that. Yeah,
I told you. 3 straight for the Panthers. One of those was 7, 8, and 1, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, the next question. So what does he do next? I think it's interesting because if he goes into the media, one, let me just be the first to advocate for him. I think he would be a home run.
Oh, I don't disagree. I don't think you're the first. I feel like it's a.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of people will say that, but I'm willing to say, I think he would replace maybe, everyone who's sitting there in a number 1 spot right now. Maybe after Troy at Fox.
Well,
he's probably the only one that they wouldn't bump, but outside of that, I think he would be a huge gift for any of them. I mean, he's got the credibility with the resume, which is a big thing, whether people, whether kids nowadays look at Chris Collinsworth and know what he accomplished as a player or not, it still matters to the executives and stuff who make the hire who do. So that's still a portion of it. The reality is, though, I think if he bought into it like Gruden did, where like Gruden found a way to tap into, it wasn't Madden, but it was similar to Madden in the aspect of he was a character. He was a likable character. He, even though at times he would, the Spider banana, it got put on blast. He used to call it everything, and you're like, okay. Or he'd be an all-out blitz, and you're like, no, it's just, blitz 11 dog. Like that's not, it's not an actual deal there. So anyway, there's examples of like him just being that kind of guy who was entertaining, informative, and he was this character you kind of loved. Just, I'm going to tune in to see John Gruden, this Gruden's grinder, like. People tune into that. I think
Sean Payton would smash.
He could be that if he bought into it and was like the guy that I think he shows from time to time. And that would be an incredibly successful career. Like I'm saying, whatever Romo signed for, you'd have to think Payton's going to sign for just as much, if not more, and he'd do a great job at it.
Okay.
But
Okay. Sorry.
does he want to do that? Because the only reason I think you do that is so that you stay visible as a coach, so that you can be visible for the hire. And that's where I feel like and I'm not saying if he sits out the year and doesn't do anything, it's not like he's not going to get hired still. But I think you go on TV sometimes to kind of remind people while other coaches are out there that, hey, this guy's pretty smart too.
So I don't disagree with that at all. But I would think that if Sean Payton is going to do a single year, if his plan is to do 1 year in media,
It'd be studio.
And you do studio, exactly. Because Bill Cowher retired we talked about this on the show too. Retired at 49. I believe he went straight to maybe he went straight to studio, right? And he's just in the studio and he's just great at what he does. And he's got he's the Bill Cowher persona. He's been rumored to come out every time, but he found that he likes the studio so much. He's like, why would I go back? Like, I won a Super Bowl. I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I walked away with a Super Bowl. Why would I go back to grinding like this when I have this great job that I enjoy, I'm good at it, et cetera? So I don't think that Fox, CBS, or whoever is going to take Sean Payton, toss Troy Aikman to the side or whoever. It's still him for 1 year. Is my point.
Right. No, and that's why I said I don't think Aikman would be the guy or anything like that. But I think if you got the commitment from Sean, like, hey, this may be it, then that's a different story. But again, the reality is when you look at the landscape right now, we don't have a coach at that top spot in that position.
Sure.
And if you look at, again, not to keep referencing John Madden, but when you look at his career in the CBS and NBC and Fox, like working for all of them, like they were all clamoring for a coach's point of view, because the reality is that's what people want.
Yeah.
Like that's the perspective that people want to hear, whether they agree or disagree with you and what your analysis is. That's what they want. That's like numero uno. Quarterback's number two, and then anyone who else can talk the game after that is probably who you're looking at next. So I think that would be he'd be a home run. He'd be a great pick for whoever would sign him for it. I think he'd be entertaining. It just comes down to like whether or not he wants to do that and toy around with it. But to your point, studio is the easiest thing to kind of jump in and back out from. But if he wants to stay in kind of a rhythm of what he does as a coach, calling games wouldn't be a bad thing either. Or bringing him in every once in a while to call a game, right? Maybe it's the Saints game next year.
I got a hypothetical for you. And this is probably, sometimes our bosses don't like us to talk about the media business, but I like this one too much. So over at NBC, Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, outstanding at their jobs. Love listening to Al and Chris. There was a rumor from Andrew Marchand of Page 6, New York Post today, that ESPN with Amazon flying in with all their Jeff Bezos money.
That's big old rocket.
Yep. But ESPN is interested in pursuing Al Michaels for the Monday Night Football gig. Now, what I would find interesting, Brady, is if they were able to entice Al Michaels to go to Monday Night Football, would you then want to pair? And you can pair Al Michaels with anybody. Like he's great at his job. But what you could do instead of pairing Al Michaels with somebody from ESPN is go to NBC and say, look, we know you guys want to eventually promote Tirico and Drew Brees. Why don't you let us buy Collinsworth? Yeah. But then you take Tirico and Brees and make it a 1 year 3-man booth with Brees and Sean Payton, like Tirico just setting it up and those guys batting it around like they're calling a game. That would be complete. Like the two guys who worked together for 14 or 15 years in the same system, high level, intelligent analyst in a 3-man booth, like that could smash.
It could. I think sometimes, though, too much of a good thing doesn't end up being what you think.
Fair.
And that's the hard part, is there is so little time to talk on a broadcast.
Yep.
Especially in a football game. If you do it right, if you do it right. And look, when I say doing it right, it's my interpretation of it. You shouldn't be really talking over the play. You should be talking up to the snap and then telling a guy you think a guy's blitzing off the edge, because everyone who's watching the TV can tell he's blitzing off the edge. Like, you don't need to tell them that. All right. That's the job of the play-by-play. You should be telling after the fact what happened, why what happened was effective or wasn't, and talking about things that maybe the viewer didn't even pay attention to and see that you're pointing out to that made it successful or lack thereof. So, in all of that, there's so much communication going on behind the scenes. as much as it sounds like a good idea, I think it would stunt the growth of Drew Brees.
Maybe.
And I think the other thing is it wouldn't allow you to have Sean Payton shine the way I think he can. And especially for someone who's just starting out doing it, whether that's Payton or Brees in this case, it takes a while to get your feet underneath you as far as the pacing and to be able to say something impactful with the short amount of time that you have. So that would be my concern is, even though it sounds like a great idea, I don't think it would work. And it's one of the reasons why everyone's like, oh, Peyton and Eli in a booth together. It's like, yeah, like what they do works now because there's no play-by-play. Right. Like you don't have that person who's eating up time that would take away from what those two are saying. And I think it's maybe one of the reservations that they have about doing an actual broadcast.
I think it's 100% why they don't want to do it.
Yeah, well, because they sit there and like, I don't have to travel and go through the stupid production meetings, all that stuff, right? We get so much out of this. You don't get crap out of it, honestly. Like, let me be real for a second. No coach or player is going to walk in there and tell you everything, or at least it's seldom that they do, because it's no disrespect to people behind the scenes. But, if you played for a guy, like he's going to look at you, he's going to say what he wants to say. And then you walk out of the room together and he tells you what you need to know. Like, right, yeah. That's how it goes. Like when you have those relationships, they're not going to trust the other people that are sitting in the room. And
with Peyton and Eli, Peyton's always like, I just texted the guy, and like 90% of the time they deal with it. There's one person who's like, I can't, or like there's somebody who Peyton was like, they wouldn't give me him for an interview, which is kind of funny. But I mean, yeah, exactly. You have so many connections, so many relationships with different people around the league. You don't need to sit down and go with a cold intro for the production meeting with everyone watching.
It was Mac Jones, the Patriots, by the way.
Mac Jones, that's right. Good call.
Yeah. So anyway, we just got through one headline. We didn't even get to the rest. So
let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll do some more headlines.
Okay.
All right, next headline.
All right, Green Bay Packers leadership is unified on wanting Aaron Rodgers back next season. Read between the lines there, Will.
Please come back, Aaron. Please.
Wait, let me add to this context, though. Like, is it really their choice or decision? No. I mean, he set this up it's kind of a mutual decision here, is it not? And their cap situation is so bad that it almost alleviates some problems. So let me just lay this out for you, because this was floated today, or I should say yesterday, Tuesday, by PFT about getting a 2-year
extension. Football Talk or PFT commenter?
No, Pro Football Talk.
Okay.
I would have included commentator.
I mean, sometimes both are just as reliable.
This is probably my point.
Yeah.
So they floated out the idea of giving him a 2-year deal, $100 million guaranteed, 50 per year. That's what the market is. He's the MVP last 2 years. Okay, great. Yeah, it's cool in theory until then you forget. Oh, remember the first round draft pick that you traded up to take? Oh, so he'd be 4 years into his contract, presumably not playing yet. And you've already had to pick up his 5th-year option that's fully guaranteed. So you just hamstrung yourself into finishing out things with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's like a nice idea, but it doesn't make any sense. That doesn't help your cap situation, even though, yeah, there's some creative things you can do to get around it. And you'd assume they'd have to, in that scenario, sign Devontae Adams to an extension. I mean, it was a wild, speculative, like hypothetical that to me doesn't make much sense because of what the position they've already put themselves in with Jordan Love. I think right now they do not want to admit it because the Packers don't want to look like the team that pushed out or traded a guy who was back-to-back MVP in the NFL.
It's never happened that the reigning MVP has left his team. It sure as hell has never happened that the reigning 2-time MVP has left his team. Rodgers also added, I think this is, I'll flip it back on you for a read between the lines. I don't want to be part of a rebuild if I'm going to keep playing, Rodgers said after Saturday night's 13-10 loss to the 49ers.
And here's the truth. If you're the Green Bay Packers, this is the perfect time for a rebuild. Okay. Your cap situation is second or third worst, I believe, going into 2022. You've got a young quarterback who you don't know anything about yet. And at some point, he's got to play. So you see if you're going to pick up the 5th-year option, that's now fully guaranteed. And then see if eventually he's your guy. So not only that, but you can move on from Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and start over, extend Rashawn Gary, extend Jared Alexander, start to make some of those decisions and build back up. But you have to think about the timing of it too. If you're able to do like a sign and trade with Devontae Adams, if he wants to go where Aaron Rodgers is at, and you could trade Rodgers and get some draft capital, you'd be set to help build this thing back up in the next 2 years in rather short fashion. And let's look around the NFC North for a second. The Lions have the worst roster in that division. They're not going to be able to all of a sudden take over that division by 2022, 2023. That's going to take a while at best.
Yep.
They're still trying to think if Goff is their answer or if they're going to go draft a quarterback. You've got the Vikings who have to hire a new head coach, a new general manager. Cousins is on his last year. Who knows if he even stays there, depending on what the new head coach, general manager think. And then you've got the Chicago Bears that their roster's in a state of disarray. They just hired, I believe, Ryan Poles as their general manager yesterday, and they're looking for a head coach still. And yes, Justin Fields may be the quarterback of the future, but they're not anywhere close either. You might find yourself, if you make these decisions where you ended up trading Aaron Rodgers to a destination of his choice, Devontae Adams moves on with them, and some of these other pieces you let go, you get in a better cap situation moving forward. You have all this draft capital heading into the next couple of years, and then you start over again. And you see what you have in Jordan Love if he's the guy. Because that's why you traded up the draft in the first place. Otherwise, it was the biggest bonehead mistake in the world. And then you got to own up to it. And you got to move on from Jordan Love now and then extend Rodgers and try to make him happy for the next 2 years. That's the only two directions this can go.
And the thing about the Jordan Love thing, let's say you trade him and you roll with Rodgers, you can't, I mean, the explanation that they would have to go with, which is like, yeah, we drafted him, but we're just going to take it as a silver lining that Aaron Rodgers was great for 4 years. It's like, no, you could have had T. Higgins or Michael Pittman, right, and maybe that's enough to push you over the top to win a Super Bowl.
Well, I know there's a list of a bunch of wide receivers. They could have had Brian Edwards. They could have all these wide receivers.
Higgins and Pittman went like 5 or 6 picks afterwards. I mean,
right? No, but they did a list of every single pick that I think they've taken the last year or two, and there was like the guy who was taken after them. You can lay out a list of wide receivers they could have instead of guys who are going to be like Alan Lazard's unrestricted free agent, Valdez Scanley's restricted free agent, Randall Cobb's probably going to be a cap casualty. I can't imagine.
Devontae Adams, free agent.
Adams, free agent. I mean, so there's all these question marks around that position, and you never addressed it. So that's a whole other conversation. But I think to your point, it does put Brian Gutekunst in that hot seat position where it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you traded up assets to get this guy. You never played him at all, really, and then you trade him off, all to invest more money into Aaron Rodgers. And yeah, it makes sense because you're like, oh, well, we didn't think he was going to be the MVP in back-to-back years. It's my bad, but yeah,
that means that was bad. Yes, that was pure bad.
Then that makes it look even worse that he didn't draft the wide receiver.
Right. You incorrectly identified the state of play of your franchise quarterback, who was a surefire Hall of Famer,
right,
and probably the greatest player in franchise history,
right.
And
the only guy you've got the last 2 years while he's been MVP has been Amari Rodgers in the draft. That's it,
right. And the other thing about this is, if you look at the way, because I was asked this about this quote, and I was like, I guess, and I started looking, and I was like, oh my God, they're $40 million over the salary cap. That's a problem. And
that's without signing Adams, by the way.
Correct. And Devontae Adams is not going to sign a contract until he knows what Aaron Rodgers is doing. They will probably franchise tag him, but that's virtually impossible until you get $15-18 million under the salary cap. The quickest way to get under the salary cap, the three most obvious candidates to cut are Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and Randall Cobb.
Right.
Two guys are two of your probably your two best pass rushers. So I guess Rashawn Gary could make a case. Yeah. And then the other guy is Aaron Rodgers' best friend.
You brought it before Aaron Rodgers.
And you also have to give Rashawn Gary and Jair Alexander extensions. Now, granted, you can give them small numbers and balloon later down the road. That's not how the Packers usually operate. They're not going to want to try and just finagle the cap upside down to make Aaron Rodgers happy. So it boils down to, you're screwed. Is what it boils down to.
No, it boils down to, all right, pick. Is he staying or is he going to be somewhere else in 2022?
Yeah. But if he stays,
I'll put it this way. I don't think he's staying.
So I want to ask you this. Before the 49ers game, I was 90+% sure that he was staying. Now I'm like 60 or 50.
I've said this throughout the entire season. And there was an NBC Sunday Night Football game where if you'll recall, Al Michaels and Chris Collins were like, he seems happy. Everything's great.
He's patched things up.
He's coming back. He's eating cheese curds now. Forget that dairy-free diet. Like, he's buying in. He just crushed a Pabst Blue Ribbon. I don't know. Did you see that? That all to me was, well, yeah, you're winning in the NFL. I've seen some really dysfunctional relationships in locker rooms that like worked because we were winning, right? Like it's like the honeymoon phase in a relationship. You're like, oh yeah, there's a couple of those like unredeeming qualities and flaws, but I mean, I don't know, like it's just hot and heavy and we love each other so much, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden when things aren't going as well, you're like, wait a second. Who's going to change that crappy diaper again? I feel like I've done the last 20. Like,
I know. Let's have another kid. That'll fix everything.
Yeah, like let's add on. So that was one of the deals where it's like everything was going great. I'm like, yeah, I'm not thinking this is the time where all this is going to come out. It's going to come out when they lose.
Yeah,
if they lose, and they did. So now it becomes the point of all of what had happened in the past and all those tough decisions they have to make. They're smacking them right in the face. And the reality is, much like the reality was last offseason, he was excited to go to San Francisco. I think he wanted to go he thought it was a realistic possibility. And it didn't happen, which, by the way, all these 49ers fans are like, oh, he's 0-4 against us in the playoffs. It's like, hey, dude, you'd love to have him right now.
You would have won. You would be winning the next 3 Super Bowls if you had Rodgers.
Yeah, you would have loved to have Aaron Rodgers. So you should be clamoring and hoping that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan find a way of bringing him in, even with Trey Lance being there and Garoppolo with a year left. But
yeah,
I digress. I do think there's that thought in his mind now where he's looking at like, where else would I want to go play? And I keep going back to Denver, especially if they end up hiring Nathaniel Hackett, who finished his second interview yesterday. If he's the head coach, you'd have to think they're assuring for one of the biggest pitches to Aaron Rodgers and bring him in there.
Because hey, do you remember when Peyton Manning came to Denver and just did what he wanted on offense? Guess who we've got? And guess what you can do? And here's Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant and a decent offensive line. They'll go to work and we'll hire somebody to run the defense and maybe they'll be good. And then it's, by the way,
you know what? They might even trade some of those assets to Green Bay, some of those wide receivers, because they need wide receivers in exchange for Devontae Adams.
That's not a terrible idea.
No. I mean, if they traded Cortland Sutton and,
Jerry Jeudy and 2 firsts for Rodgers and Devontae. Maybe 3 first.
Well, they got some seconds too you could throw in there. But you get what I'm saying. I mean, that's a possible scenario. You could trade some assets to some pieces. Yep. I mean, you only need a little bit of running game, Devontae Adams, and one other piece. I mean, that seems to be able to be what Green Bay does. But one last thing on Rodgers. He's claiming that people root against him because of his vaccination status. Are you buying this? Are you read between the lines here?
I would guess that there are definitely people who root against him, who are not pro Aaron Rodgers because of his outspoken status and immunization beliefs. And I mean, Joe Rogan stuff.
I do. Well, I think by and large, like we're a country that's basically you pick a side, all right?
Yeah.
I'm on this side, you're on that side, all right? We can't agree on anything else, okay? Is chocolate ice cream good? Yes, it is. No, it's not. Do you like it? Okay, I don't like it then.
Mr. Vanilla, mother. Yeah.
It's just, what is it, Neapolitan, where you've got the 3 different flavors?
I like all 3.
You can't have Neapolitan in this, all right?
You flavored cuck. What are you doing? Get out of here.
So, the reality is, it's true. I know people don't want to admit it, but it is true. I think there's also probably a group that would say, well, you lied to us, and that's really what it's about. It's like,
Now there's also a group that's like, you know who I love? Aaron Rodgers, baby. Like, you're a Bears fan. I don't care.
I don't care. He didn't get that back. And then there's those who are like, we're going to jab him when we see him. We're going to make sure he gets that back.
I would also point out in the 49ers thing, like if the 49ers could have traded 2 first-round picks for Rodgers last offseason, I guess they would have to give up their first-round pick last year. So maybe this is
well, that was the idea behind is when they traded up to the number 3 overall, they were thinking that along with another package of picks was going to be enough
to get Rodgers.
And
when it didn't happen,
the 49ers backed out.
Do you think that was in place? And then, what do you think the 49ers backed out?
Oh, excuse me, the Packers backed out.
Yeah, the Packers backed out, and so it was probably a leak from the 49ers about Rodgers wanting to be traded on draft day to try and push it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably make a little more sense. Or maybe even if Rodgers wanted it so much.
Or Rodgers found out the Packers backed out and was pissed and was like, hey, leak this out now.
I think that's the more likely scenario.
I mean, in hindsight, the Packers should have done it.
Yeah.
I mean,
you just put it off for another year. And I mean, look, they were the number 1 seed in the NFC. I don't know that I'm actually going to subscribe to that. I do think they had a shot at winning a Super Bowl as good as
I'm
anyone.
saying in hindsight with the law of the playoff law.
Well, yeah, I mean, hindsight's always 2020 though. Like the reality is, like I think they played the best they could. It's now time to cut ties. Like where I think, like I said before, it's the perfect time to rebuild if you want to rebuild, given all the complications. All right, let's talk about Tom Brady. Tom Brady points to his family, fatherhood, when it comes to a decision about his potential retirement. Which I got to tell you, I'm going to actually read between the lines here in a second, but pretty cool that you can play for as long as he has and has been the all-time like greatest maybe like athlete we've ever seen with his resume. And you can be like, yeah, I've gotten so old at this that it's like, it's just time for me to go be with my family. Like I'm tired of sacrifice everything for them. So,
you know, what's weird is like how, Tom Brady's kids are pretty young.
yeah, some of them are. Some of them are.
But he definitely has a kid who's younger than I do, and I guess I'm only 5 years younger now. Never mind.
Well, but he's got kids from Bridget Moynihan, that relationship, right?
Yes, yeah, or I think one from Bridget Moynihan, who is the oldest, and then the kid, multiple kids with. Yeah, I guess when you have that second, yeah, that's true. That makes sense. I would say that reading between the lines here, Tom Brady is setting the table to let everyone appreciate whatever his decision ultimately is. But at the end of the day, he's really just placating his wife.
You're the worst. Is AK somewhere around? Is that why you're saying this? He's like sitting right outside the door.
Twitter either.
I
mean, like, I think that Giselle has wanted him to retire for, gosh, I mean, literally over a decade.
She said after last year, right? Wasn't she recorded as saying, like, what else do you have to prove? And he came back this year.
She backed the bus over Wes Welker after the 2011 Super Bowl. Yeah. And I think she's wanted him to get out for a while because he's done everything he could possibly do. And, you know, now it's kind of like, I think he could be talked into it, but oldest kid, by the way, 14, youngest is 9. So it's actually his youngest is 1 year older than Robbie. But I think it's a lot of, I'm 44. I don't know if I'm going to play because I'm 44.
Right.
I'm old. I have kids. I want to be able to walk away when I can walk away. And I think it's more like, I want to take some time to reflect.
I think it was interesting that Bruce Arians came out right away and said, hey, I'm coming back next year. It's like, really? Do you want to come back if Tom's not coming back? Like,
I really didn't like being in that booth with Trent Green.
It's like, I mean, do we want to like give it a beat? Like, I mean, by the way, on that note, Gronk says he's unsure if he's coming back in 2022. Probably the least shocking news, considering if what Aaron Rodgers does is correlated to what Devontae Adams does, I would say the stronger correlation is Gronk and Tom Brady. Like if Gronk didn't come back,
he would come back without Brady, which is like, no, you won't. Like, you're not coming back without Brady. You already left once with Brady.
Yeah.
Mainly because they tried to trade you to the Lions. You're like, no, you're not doing that. I'll retire.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no read between the lines there. He's just not coming back if Brady's not. You know, that's the bottom line. He'll move on with life, and he's done great off the field. He'll go back in the TV or
just go back to doing what he was doing when he was retired the first time.
Yeah, like running like party cruises and stuff. That, I mean, maybe not during COVID, but actually knowing him,
cruises.
Yeah, maybe during COVID. You know, at this point. All right, last one.
What do you think, Brady? What do you think Tom Brady does?
I'm leaning towards thinking he's going to retire. There's, I'd heard from someone in the organization that there's a lot of people there who weren't normally there before the game. And it was a bit surprising. So even before the game, he was kind of contemplating whether or not this indeed would be it for him this season. So,
and he did give that. It was very weird, by the way, having Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth during the day on a Sunday. Like, and Al Michaels is like, well, tonight, Chris, we've got to. It's like it's 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock.
It's actually noon your time. Oh no, I guess it was in Tampa. So it was 3 o'clock. Yeah. But they had they put up a quote during the game that Brady's like, I'd love to go out with the Super Bowl. I know it might not always happen, and this might not be the year, which is like, you told Al and Chris that before the game?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, their defense didn't play together until this last divisional game. Like, it's kind of crazy to think like, hey, run it back, but like no one was able to run it back together, at least on defense. But I think that's a part of it too, though, right? Is you ran it back because you won a Super Bowl and you could. It's a lot harder to sell to guys now when you look at it and say, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not sure if we can do it again. Looking at kind of how things went last year, and then, the report that there was some turmoil, right? Levante David talked about that. I think that had to do with Antonio Brown, but the reality is, like, I think now, like, the guys who are young enough that are going to become free agents, like a Chris Godwin, even though he's coming off a knee injury, they got to go get paid. They got to go get that money while they still can.
Well, I mean, there's a chance Godwin's not back until, you never know with these knee injuries. He could be back he could be ready for free agency. He was franchise tagged. I would doubt they'll tag him again because he's, ACL. So if you're Tom Brady, you're like, okay, my offensive line is intact, but Wirfs got injured late. I don't know what his deal is, although you would think he'd be able to play. Mike Evans is still there, of course, but AB's gone. He embarrassed me on his way out. So, like, am I going to come back with Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, a half-invested Gronk, and Mike Evans? Because that sounds a lot less explosive.
The last time I was in New England.
Right. Yeah. So you think we'll get Aaron Rodgers, and I would also point out that Brady's, the way that it came out, which is what, you get from guys like Tom Brady and from Sean Payton. We're very similar to Sean Payton. It bubbled up a little bit beneath the surface, and then it starts to report out during, like leading into the final week of this, It just the signs point towards it, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's plenty of time to see. That's where I'm kind of leaning, thinking about all this and then what he's done at this point in time. And he always said he wanted to play till he's 45. Well, he'll be 45 here soon, or this year. So, all right, last one. Colts owner Jim Irsay tweets that it's clear as day how to win in the NFL, and it raises some questions. He also made some comments in regards to players.
Specific points per game comments.
Yes, more than 30 points per game, less than offensively, defensively. He also went into like a parable about, a guy drowning, and I'm not even going to get into that. But the point of the story was basically a guy goes to heaven and asks God, "Why didn't you help me?" He said, I was trying to send people to yell to help you, but you didn't want to listen to him.
I didn't see that part.
It seems like, and I guess I'll just segue into it. It seems like it was a direct shot at Carson Wentz.
It seems like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and
put a direct shot at Carson Wentz.
I'm not going to put words in his mouth. Okay.
Well, why don't you read between the lines and tell me what you think he said?
Yeah, well, I try to read between his lyrics. So I'm a big Jim Irsay band, celebrator of his music. All right. So his 3.5 man band, he's got 2 guys who play and he sings, and then he's got like a tree or something he leans on half the time, when he's. I mean,
it's like the video he released. He's like standing outside a private jet, and the turbines are going, and he's like being blown over, and he's like, "Colts Nation, we will not stand for this losing." It's like, good God.
He's like part Vince McMahon sometimes, part just like, I don't even know how to describe him. Yeah. It's like a little bit of Jerry Jones. Like, it's a weird mixture of what he is, but you really got to check out the Jim Irsay collection and see some of his music videos. Like the one outside the Washington Memorial's pretty epic. He almost bends over a tree. So there's that. I'm not sure who needed the sport more, him or the tree at that point.
Yeah, definitely Irsay. I mean, I think he's sending a message to Frank Reich that he's not I think he's sending a message to Chris Ballard and Frank Reich, and it's more to Frank Reich because that was his, or at least from our point of view, I think it's more to Frank Reich because he
bringing Carson Wentz. Yeah.
He pounded the table for Wentz, and Chris Ballard has not supported Carson Wentz publicly. I think what's interesting is that this organization, since being spurned by Josh McDaniels, has largely been in lockstep on almost every decision, like universally praised for making smart moves, being.
That's because they thought it was smart to do, hard knocks during the season. That kind of backfired on you.
Yeah. I'm saying before the Carson Wentz thing, it
was Andrew Luck. That's who got them in this position right now. They're in a much better position had Andrew Luck not retired. Forget Josh McDaniels.
I'm not trying to rip McDaniels. I'm just saying that when Ballard got hired and then had to go hire Frank Reich, that they've been a pretty stable organization with how they've operated. They've been frugal. They've been smart. They built up a good roster. And then they tried to push all in this year. And I think I wonder how much it creates a schism between Ballard and Reich, which in turn creates a schism with Irsay, because Reich is the guy who put Ballard in this position to give up valuable draft picks to go and get Carson Wentz, who simply is not the same guy that he was in 2017. And if you go forward with Carson Wentz in 2022, and you don't make the playoffs, people are probably going to lose their jobs.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what's at stake. And I think he's put out there publicly. He's not the only owner doing that. Michael Bidwell was disappointed, voiced his disappointment too, and having to watch the other two teams that made it to the playoffs from the NFC West play for the NFC Championship. But I want to do a rapid fire round with you. All right. So we got 30 seconds. We got a few topics. Andy Reid talked about the overtime rules. He's actually a proponent of maybe changing them, which is interesting because he's seen both sides of this one, right? He was impacted by the AFC Championship game where the Pats won the coin toss. They drive down, win, game over. Now he wins the toss. They beat the Bills. Now they're in the in the AFC Championship game again. Give me your quick 30-second answer. Should the overtime rules be changed? By the way, timing you.
Okay. Andy Reid and the Chiefs floated a proposal to change it back after the 2018 season. It got shot down. I think that there are probably some better ways to do overtime, but it is also difficult to find a way that is surefire to make everybody happy. I like the idea of home field advantage. You get the ball first in overtime. That's what you get. You in the playoffs. You earn home field advantage by virtue of your better regular season. Reward it. You get the ball first.
Time up. Okay. All right. Not bad. I'm gonna give myself 30 seconds. All right. Yeah. First off, overtime and regulation. It's stupid. We don't need it. If you can end overtime with a tie, you don't need it in the first place. All right. Just get rid of it. Games end at the end of regulation. Let's move on now to the playoffs. You've already changed it once. It used to be a field goal would win it. Now we've made it a touchdown. At some point, this has to stop. What were we going to do? Have Kansas City go score a touchdown, then Buffalo, then Kansas City do it again to win? Like, what's the point of that? So it doesn't need to be changed. It's fine. Play some defense. And at the end of the day, like, there's always going to be one side upset. Boom. That's 30 seconds, by the way.
Yeah, I timed it. So
thank you.
32.
All right. Next one. Taunting. When does it matter? Considering Sunday night's game, it seemed like the rule was almost implemented for Tyreek Hill, and yet he wasn't called.
Tyreek Hill was the very first person to be called for taunting, if I recall correctly, in the 2021 regular season for doing this. After the game, he goes, "I'm just trying to spread peace and love and joy." It's like, shut up. Are you kidding me?
I do. But okay, ready? 30 seconds.
When does it matter? 10 in.
When does it matter?
Here's the problem. If you want to call taunting, then call it. But if you're going to call it like randomly throughout the course of the season and in the playoffs, if you're going to call Tom Brady for taunting with his lips bleeding and Ndamukong Suh for taunting, but you're not going to call Tyreek Hill for the taunt, then don't call it at all.
Oh, that was like in 17 seconds. Well done. All right, I'll be quick on this. I don't care. I think this is the dumbest rule ever. It boundaries on like the no fun league. People can act like, oh, it escalates situations, or it's bad for the kids out there watching. Kids do this stuff normally. All right. It doesn't matter what the pros do. They're still going to do their own thing with it. And by the way, hire some more officials so the game's better officiated. Maybe you stop some of the skirmishes and it doesn't get to that point. So I just think the whole idea that taunting leads to more fights in the NFL, it's the stupidest reasoning. Let it happen. All right. Last one. All right. Did the Super Bowl already happen?
Ooh, no. The Super Bowl will actually take place. But the best game of the year has already occurred.
I think in asking that, it's more like
I know. Yes. Well, the Super Bowl could never take place between two AFC teams. So no, it did not take place. Look,
yes. This isn't a literal answer. All right. It's like, was that the best two teams in the NFL scoring off in the divisional round?
The whole point of giving you the literal answer was to like perplex you and make you mad. No, of course, the Chiefs and the Bills are clearly the best two teams in football.
Ooh.
But one of them is going to get through and the other's not. That's just how the bracket works. And at the end of the day, more than likely the Chiefs will play somebody else, but it's possible that one of the best two teams in football doesn't even make the Super Bowl, and it won't matter. You hoist the trophy, you hoist the trophy.
I agree with you. It is, I will say this. I do feel like we kind of already saw the Super Bowl in the divisional round. It's all downhill from here. You'll be hard pressed to find a better game, in part because that's probably the top two quarterbacks, at least now, looking at the fact that we're not going to get Rodgers. He's the other one in that conversation. And then you're not going to get Tom Brady. He's another one you'd include. So
Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I wouldn't conclude him with the other four guys we've talked about.
You might in like 2 or 3 weeks. Just saying.
Dude, I'm sorry. You come on. If you're putting him in the same vein as Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, it's not the same, dude. I'm sorry. Tom Brady. I mean, really?
I'm trolling.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, like, I'm not trying to get in trouble for this. Like, he's done very well in the playoffs. He's had help. He's got a good roster he's playing on. They've got a great chance. I mean, eventually Sean McVay is going to get the better of Kyle Shanahan. It probably will be this week.
If Matthew Stafford wins the Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams this year, is Matthew Stafford a Hall of Famer?
Yes, because he'll have the one thing that he was missing, and he's already got the stats.
Let's go, Stafford. I want to stick this in Pete Prisco's eyes so bad.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is I think you're getting to an argument now where like you would say statistically, I think Matt Ryan actually has been a better quarterback statistically, but he doesn't have that Super Bowl, even though he's been a league MVP before, and that'd be the only thing he'd be missing. And so like, are you going to hold him out? I mean, Phillip Rivers, your boy, you're going to hold him out? Like there's a lot of guys who I think you can make a statistical argument. Probably guys who have better stats than Eli Manning, but Manning's got 2 Super Bowls.
The Super Bowls are the trump cards. A Super Bowl is the
look, I think most players would say to me, it's the dumbest thing to use wins losses as what determines whether or not those guys get in. Like, even though they impact the game the most of any other professional sports league for Hall of Fame, it's still the least amount compared to other positions.
Well, right? I look at it like this, and obviously I'm biased, but from the 2004 draft class, I think Phillip Rivers is unquestionably the best quarterback out of that draft class.
Better than Ben?
I think Ben Roethlisberger unquestionably has the best career out of the draft class. And I think Eli Manning unquestionably has the easy, like the like just the trump card to get into the Hall of Fame.
I don't know that. I'd still say Ben was the best.
And I think Ben and Phil.
I would say Ben, Phillip, Eli.
Okay.
I mean, because think about it, and again, this is no disrespect, but like look at, granted Ben had Jerome Bettis, Phillip had LaDainian Tomlinson. Like you can go kind of tit for tat with some of the players they each had, but the reality is, look, they're both Hall of Famers in my opinion. All 3 Hall of Famers in my opinion.
I agree. Oh boy. What's you got up here?
We got per game averages. Okay. So Stafford's got better yards per game. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, it's got totals and per game.
Yeah.
Okay. So
just proving Brady's point.
Look how even they are.
Yeah, they're very close. No, I think it's fascinating because
it's like even the amount of attempts they have, completions, yards per game, touchdown interception ratios, like that is nuts.
And like again, you can go back to the big what ifs. Like, what if Matthew Stafford is drafted by somebody other than I have for a long time, and I feel if the Rams. I feel vindicated now, but if the Rams win 1 or 2 more games, I think it's a stone cold vindication that, we talk about this all the time on this podcast. Part of like a quarterback's.
Yeah. It's where they go. The situation
where you go. And like,
well, and look at Jared Goff this year. Like he gets sent to that. And obviously it was rough going at times, even though
he played really well.
Last 5 games, he played better than Stafford did, statistically speaking. Sure. So, I thought he fought through that well, but no, it's situation and circumstance that any quarterback goes to is paramount. It's why, look, Tom Brady going to New England is part of the greatness of what he was able to do.
Yeah.
Along with Bill Belichick and everyone else. No different than Aaron Rodgers. And he'd tell you that. That's why I think that's not to come back full circle. That would be one of the hesitations, I think, if you're Aaron Rodgers is, do you want your career to end that way? Where you're viewed as the guy with the stint with the Packers, but then somewhere else? Or do you just want to retire? Maybe he wants to do that. Maybe he wants to get out for a while.
Do you think that Tom Brady has normalized that with the 2 years and, won the Super Bowl and then 2?
I think Tom Brady, what he did was he motivated other because all quarterbacks think they're better than everyone else. They do. I'm just telling you. Like
we talk about this. Yeah, we mentioned this. Do you think that other quarterbacks think they're better than Tom Brady? That's because that was kind of
yes. Like okay. If you're asking me, do I think like Aaron Rodgers is like I'm more talented than Tom Brady? Yes, I
probably is.
Patrick Mahomes or Josh. We all dude. Everyone does. Like everyone's like, dude. All right, let's go on the street. Let's go pick stuff to throw at. Let's see who's better. Like every quarterback thinks that. All right, even though there's a guy at 3rd string somewhere who thinks that. Right. That's just how it is. So then you look at what Tom Brady did, and a lot of guys like obviously Russell Wilson was like, hey, I don't want to be traded, but here's the 4 teams I would want to go to. You sort of hear the stuff from Aaron Rodgers' camp, and like all that came out. Like all these quarterbacks are going, yeah, I want to go somewhere else. Like Matt Stafford's like, yeah, I want to get out of Detroit. I mean, it literally was one of those, yeah, look what he was able to do, and he got guys that you got brought in to sign with him. And I think that sparked a lot of other quarterbacks being infuriated, going, wait a second. How much do I get paid? Like, aren't I the most important piece? And you're not involving me in these decisions that directly affect my legacy, my career, our chances of winning? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I think he was probably the one that spurred a lot of the movement we're going to see, honestly, this offseason too.
And made it sort of, because in years past, it's always been kind of a thing where, like Peyton Manning went to the Broncos and had wild success and won a Super Bowl and went to 2 of them. But, he was cut by the Colts.
Yeah. It was like, they didn't know how his neck was going to return and all that.
They kicked him out of town for Andrew Luck. And it was, an honorable discharge is the best way you could describe it, because they, he was up on the podium and it was a very sad moment, all that, but they're still cutting him. And now I feel like quarterbacks are a little more, because of the Brady move, or feel a little more empowered to be like, you know what? Screw it. I don't have to play for the same organization the whole time. Like I'll go, like Tom Brady went down to Tampa and won a Super Bowl away from Bill Belichick. Like I'll go somewhere else.
Dude, no one wants to be cut. Like I didn't get cut till I was 7 years in the league. I got traded, signed a 1-year deal, ended up not getting signed back and it looked elsewhere, but it's different getting cut. It's different when someone like literally tells you to get fired. I mean,
getting fired sucks.
It's a hard thing to take into account, man. Like my entire life, like even as a busboy, even working odd jobs, whether it's like in retail or something else, I prided myself on the work I did. Never been fired before, And so like when you get that call, you're like, what?
And you got fired by like Ray Farmer or somebody. I don't know who the GM was, but I mean, like,
no, this was John Schneider and Pete Carroll. I was out in Seattle in 2014.
Because you weren't cut by.
No, I was traded by Cleveland.
Oh, that's right.
I finished out the contract in Denver. So it's
we're gonna get E60 on like a Brady Quinn investigation. Has Brady Quinn ever been fired? He claimed on the Pick Six podcast he's never been fired until the Seahawks. However, a new emerging details about Brady's time as a busboy.
No, I mean the reality is it is like one of those tough things to swallow and how to take it. Like I remember in 2014 when the Dolphins like let me go at the end of training camp. I remember I was like, all right, I'm out. Like, what do I need to sign? I'm good. Like, Coach Phil, I was like, I can't get out of here fast enough. Like, I like give me on my next opportunity or something else. And at that point, I knew I was hopping into a TV booth. So I was more like, all right, like I got to be in Fort Worth at what time? All right, just make sure I have the mute button held down if I need to cough or something. And here we go. Like, it was such a different experience. But it honestly, like, if you're Peyton Manning, at some point, you still hold that as a bit of a grudge, like I would think.
Oh yeah. Still, I think sure he sees Jim Irsay. He's like, hey Jim, like, of course I appreciate you drafting me. And we won 1 Super Bowl, probably win more if Bill Polian hadn't screwed things up. But and he cut me in 2011. I won the Super Bowl. You didn't. What are you gonna do about it?
Think about it. He went to 2 more after that. Set records. I mean,
no, they went to 2.
Peyton.
No, Peyton went to 2 with the Broncos.
Yeah, he went to 2, 1-1. But I'm saying he set records for single season records. Like, if you go back and think about that decision by the Colts, I mean, I know the prospects of Andrew Luck. I get all of that.
They could have gotten 4 first-round picks, maybe more, for Andrew Luck and put it around Peyton Manning, and with Peyton playing the way he played in Denver. But on the other hand, maybe.
But look at it in retrospect too. The fact that the way things ended for Andrew Luck. You're going like, oh, like you made that decision to move on from the dude, and then the guy you invested into didn't even stick it out. Like I don't know, like that is one of like the all-timers that I don't think we talk about enough. Everyone's just like, yeah, it was a friendly breakup. It's like, no, probably not really.
It was. I mean, like at the time, it was even like, all right, look, you have to do it. Unfortunately, even if you think Peyton might be great, you can't chance passing up on Andrew Luck.
Until hindsight now tells us maybe you should have.
Yes, in hindsight, yes, you should have. Correct. All right. We've been doing this for too long. You already put your family down.
Yeah. Kids are in bed.
I think
put them in sleeper hold to get them down. Literally had to just, put them in sleeper hold and go to sleep.
Don't you have only daughters?
Yeah. Toughen them up, man. All right. So you got to keep them wild, keep them frisky, get them ready to go.
Meanwhile, my son's like, putting me in a sleeper hold. It's not going to work.
Just punch you in the face.
Yeah, and elsewhere. Big Not Shot fan. That's Robbie Brinson. All right. Brady, as always.
Talk
to you next week, man.
See you, man.